Good morning and welcome to today's webinar where the Voinovich School will be discussing the Ohio Shale Development Community Impact Survey, our primary findings from our 2013 survey. My name is Alyssa Welch and I'm a project manager for CE3 here at the Voinovich School. And I'll be handing it over to Scott Miller, our director, who will be providing the primary presentation for today.
Thank you, Alyssa. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And once again, on behalf of Ohio University's Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on the briefing on the primary findings of a recently completed survey on the impacts that Ohio's shale industry is having on eastern Ohio's communities. As Alyssa said, my name is Scott Miller, and I'm the director of the school's Consortium for Energy, Economics, and the Environment, which is also known as CE3. A recording of this webinar is going to be posted on the new Shale section of our website at www.ohio.edu/CE3 very soon. And you're going to receive a copy of the report if you go to the link at the bottom of the page in shaleimpactsurvey.cfm. Today's webinar is being brought to you by the Consortium for Energy, Economics, and the Environment, or CE3. CE3 is a partnership between Ohio University's Russ College of Engineering, the College of Arts and Sciences, and the Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs. The consortium is a strategic initiative of Ohio University and was established in 2005 as a focal point for university research, teaching, and outreach around the linkages between energy and its economic and environmental consequences. Its primary mission is to link what I like to call pockets of excellence across the university, which are represented on the slide in front of you, to study the challenging issues at the core of our state's energy economy. Related to shale, the university is conducting a wide variety of research with prominent researchers focused on topics as varied as water quality monitoring and air quality monitoring, to water remediation technologies, housing affordability, pipeline and borehole corrosion, advanced materials processing, alternative fuels, supply chain analyses, and many more. Today's briefing is focused on an opinion survey conducted last summer by researchers at the Center for Public and Strategic Innovation at the Voinovich School. The shale plays impacting our study area are the Marcellus and Utica shales. The Marcellus, which has received considerable attention due to its vast reserves of natural gas, covers only a small portion of Ohio. The much more economically important formation in Ohio is the Utica and Point Pleasant formation. Combined, the Marcellus and the Utica are the largest formations in the continental U.S. The Utica in particular has been compared to the Bakken formation in North Dakota, which is a primarily oil-bearing strata, and the Eagle Ford in Texas. Both of these formations are at a mature stage of development with thousands of wells and years of production statistics behind them. The Utica development is relatively new by comparison, with the formation only recently eclipsing the one mark with just over 700 wells drilled and just around 240 wells producing. I mention all of this because it's important to note that by all accounts, Ohio is still in an early stage of Utica shale development. On a national level, the confluence of two technologies, hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling, led to the advent of shale development. Previously, these formations were deemed too inaccessible and economically unreachable until the technology was perfected about 20 years ago. As a result of the shale boom, the U.S. Energy Information Administration recently determined in its most recent annual assessment that the U.S. last year surpassed both Russia and Saudi Arabia as the top producer of petroleum and natural gas hydrocarbons in the world. Ohio has a lot going for it when it comes to Utica and Marcellus development. We have easy access to markets. We're within 12 hours drive time to about half of the population of the United States. We have a well-respected and well-developed logistics infrastructure with lots of roads and railroads. If you need to get materials from the East Coast to the Midwest or vice versa, you're probably going to end up going through Ohio. We're in very close proximity to all 5 primary states that are spanned by the Marcellus and Utica shale formations. We have a very well-established supply chain which helps lower the costs for transactions. Many thousands of miles of natural gas distribution lines, multimodal and intermodal networks, and all of these opportunities will create bigger opportunities in the midstream and downstream for the oil and gas development. Of course, there are challenges in this new industrial growth. Local government officials are grappling with these issues. This is the crux of our study and the reason why we launched this survey last year. It is still early enough in the growth of this industry to conduct what we feel is a baseline assessment of community leaders' perceptions of this industry's impacts on their communities in eastern Ohio. Included in these are issues such as meeting the local workforce needs, the large water requirements, where is the water going to come from, how will it be cleaned and disposed of and released and reused, are first responders prepared to respond to oil and gas well disasters? How do you reclaim the sites, road traffic, bridges and roads and culverts and more, and also workforce housing. Where is there enough adequate housing for workers? Is there, and do those out-of-state workers displace existing local residents? Ohio University has been studying all of these things. Our work is based upon decades of similar such research in energy, environment, and other economic issues, and supports the regional prosperity in eastern Ohio and southern Ohio. This is our region, this is where we live, and this is not an abstract research project for us. Now let's discuss our study. Our goals for the study were as follows. We first wanted to initiate a longitudinal shale development survey research project. What we've begun here is the first of what we expect will be a number of surveys and similar research to study community responses to Ohio shale boom. Our second goal was to gather the perceptions of shale activity impacts. The opinions that are represented in the study constitute one data point among many, which should be taken as a representative sample of local leaders' thoughts regarding the shale industry at a snapshot in time, which was the summer of 2013. And finally, we were interested in establishing a baseline so that we can study changes over time. We plan to study how these perceptions change as Ohio shale play matures. It's also important to note that this is our initial survey findings, and we're going to continue to do additional research with this data going forward. It's also important for us to talk a little bit about what the survey is and isn't. I just want to let people know this is an opinion survey that was sent to public officials in the shale-impacted region of the state. It's also important to note that this survey covered a wide variety of both opportunities as well as challenges that public officials may be facing. And as a result of the nature of the survey, we cannot attribute the causality to anyone's answers in this survey. It's not possible for us to determine on our end why respondents answered in the manner that they did. We simply trust that they answered in good faith and to the best of their abilities with the information that they have available to them. So here's our survey. We deployed last year in July of 2013 a mail survey to local officials in 17 counties, the counties that are represented on this slide. These counties represent the epicenter for shale development in the state of Ohio at that. In July, we mailed out 540 surveys to every county commissioner in the study area, every mayor or city manager, and to every township trustee. Of the 540 surveys that were sent out, we received 227 back for a response rate of 42%, which for anyone who has conducted research, survey research, you know is a very good response rate. After carefully reviewing the returned surveys, 36 respondents did not answer question 1, which was a critical component of our analysis, and so they were separated from the final analysis that you will see here today. So the final number of responses that we are reporting on today is 191 fully completed surveys. The breakdown by type of respondents is as follows. We had 66 mayors and city managers respond for 34.6% of our total respondents. 16 county commissioners responded for 8.4% of our total respondents, and 109 township trustees responded for a total of 57.1% of our total response rate. Now, question number 1 that I mentioned before was important to our analysis. So I think it's important that we address the issue of the discarded surveys just very briefly. Question number 1 stated, please think about the area that you serve. Which of the following shale development activities are occurring in your area, and please mark all that apply. We gave folks 5 primary activities in the shale industry. These are just broad representative samples of the different activities that occur during shale development, plus a 6th answer, no activity. Those 5 were horizontal shale well drilling, injection well construction, supply yards or other staging areas, worker camps, refinery development, and no activity. Respondents were free to answer more than once to this question since multiple activities may be occurring in their area. And as we mentioned, the 36 surveys that were removed due to a lack of response to this question, which prevented an analysis of these respondents. So we took the data from our survey, and we're going to be describing to you the analysis that we did in 3 different ways. The first is shale development activity that our respondents reported to be taking place from question 1, shale well drilling, injection well construction, supply yards, staging areas, and others. The second analysis that we did is by the respondent's position, commissioners, city managers, trustees. And then finally, the third type of analysis, we occasionally collapsed all of those respondent types into one block of respondents. Respondents were asked to answer for the area that they served. So township trustees were reporting on their township, county commissioners on their county, mayors, and so on and so forth. So this varied depending on the type of local official. Some respondents are answering for the entire county, as I said, and for the township. There were times when we collapsed them all just for purposes of display, and I'll describe that in just a moment. So here is one example of where we collapsed all of the respondents by county just for the ease of displaying to you what's going on. This is the geographic service area that we were looking at. These are the 17 counties that were polled during our survey. And if I could, I understand that this is maybe a little bit difficult to read. The screen may be a little bit difficult to read. So I've blown up the legend in this slide so that you can see what we're discussing here are the responses to question number 1. These are the different types of shale activity that are occurring in the region, shale well drilling, injection well construction, pipeline construction, and so on. And then the intensity with which that is occurring is displayed on the bar chart above. This is an example of the bar chart that I'll go back to the map in just a moment. So we've broken out the responses to each of these activities by 0% or no activity, 1 to 49.9%, and 50 to 100% of that activity is going on. So let me go back to our map again, and you'll see that there are areas such as, for instance, Carroll and Harrison counties, where our respondents indicated that there was a lot of above 50% horizontal shale well drilling, pipeline construction, shale supply yards, and other staging areas, which is what we would expect given the intensity of well drilling in those areas. We juxtaposed that, for instance, with what's going on in Holmes County, was reported by folks in Holmes County who reported about 1 to 49% injection well construction, no other activities in Holmes County. And so you can see the intensity with which the respondents felt things were occurring in their regions, and then we aggregated this by county on this map. We also wanted to talk to you a little bit about the types of responses that we got. We got very good geographic representation from all the 17 counties that were polled. We felt like this was a very nice, evenly spread distribution, and with that as well. So I just wanted to start the analysis, the major analysis for our study and our findings by going to one of the last questions in the survey. We introduced this at the very end. We asked our respondents, in general, how would you describe the impact that shale development is having in the area that you serve? And according to the majority of local officials, the impact of shale activity has generally been positive. You'll see the answers that we allowed, positive, no change, negative, and don't know. And by and large, the respondents thought that the shale activity has been a net positive for their region. Across all the local officials, 61.4% reported positive impacts, 25.7% reported that shale had resulted in no change to their service area, and only 7.8% indicated that the impact had been negative. It's important to note that this is one of the final questions, as I mentioned, so we didn't introduce any bias at the front end on this generally positive view of shale development. So for the rest of our analysis, we've broken it into 4 clusters. And the first cluster I'd like to discuss is the cluster that we're referring to as population, housing, and public safety. So we asked a question, please indicate the impact that shale development has had on population. This analysis is cross-tabulated, meaning that we analyzed respondents' answers to the types of activities that they reported occurring locally from question 1 with the issue of population. So how are they attributing the increase in population? I think it's just important to dwell on this just a little bit so that we don't get lost on this. So as I said, we've cross-tabulated this. And in this case, we see that the percentage of respondents indicating population increase due to shale development ranges from 42.9% of our respondents attributing the increase in population to horizontal shale well drilling and injection well construction to as high as 85.7% to refinery development. And once again, we can't attribute why respondents felt that the refinery development led to an increase in population, just that they perceived that. We also asked about the increase in property values and the cost of land. Property and land costs have increased in counties with shale activity, according to the majority of respondents, with the low of 54.8% attributing it to injection well construction, to as high as 90.5% attributing it to refinery development. It's also interesting to note that more than a third of the respondents in areas that said that there was no activity reported in their jurisdiction see an increase in property development. So they're not in the epicenter necessarily, and they're not necessarily seeing activity, major activity in shale development, but they're still seeing and reporting an increase in property and land costs. We also asked about the impact that shale development is having on housing rental costs. In counties with shale activity, nearly 2/3 or more of respondents indicated an increase in housing rental costs due to the impact of shale development. Respondents attribute refinery development to 90% of that, followed closely by supply yards and staging areas at around 86.2% as the primary drivers behind increased housing rental costs. And again, we see 31.3% of respondents who say that there is no shale activity occurring in their area, indicating that housing rental costs are going up as a result of shale. This next slide covers several responses to several questions in the survey that are all relatively low. So for ease of display, we put them all in one slide. For these questions, we collapse all of the respondents down into a single unit. So we asked, please indicate the impact that shale development has had on what we're calling a basket of issues of public safety. And these issues included alcohol-related offenses, drug-related offenses, assaults, theft, and prostitution. And you'll see that overall, the response rate for these is very low, less than 15% for every single one of them. Now let's talk about the issue of infrastructure and the environment. We asked the question, please indicate the impact that shale development has had on traffic volume. We're going back here to a cross-tabulated analysis, and in this response, in this question, you can see that this was a bit of a hot-button issue. In areas with ongoing shale development activities, the majority of respondents across activities, ranging from 75.6% for injection well construction to 100%, attributing it to refinery development indicate that shale development has increased traffic volume. And even in areas with no direct shale activity, just under half, 44.9%, indicate that shale development has led to an increase in traffic volume. We also asked the question, please indicate the impact that shale development has had on the need for public road maintenance. You can see here that public road maintenance has increased. The need for public road maintenance has increased as a result of shale development, with a low of 61.0% indicating that injection well construction is driving an increased need for public road maintenance, to a high of 95.2% of respondents indicating that refinery development is driving a need for public road maintenance. And again, we see relatively high numbers of respondents in areas with no activity indicating a need for public road maintenance at 36.7%. Bridge maintenance as a function of overall road maintenance, slight dip here. The bridge maintenance may be a lagging indicator, or they're not seeing that it's a significant issue, but we're seeing a high of 66.7% of folks responding that refinery development is driving a need for increased bridge maintenance and inspection. We also asked a separate question towards the end of our survey because we were interested in understanding how many jurisdictions had signed road use maintenance agreements, or RUMAs. RUMAs are contractual agreements between shale development companies and local jurisdictions. And when we asked, more than 61.4% of county commissioners and township trustees indicated that they had signed RUMA agreements with shale developers in their service area. We also asked the impact that shale development has had on noise pollution. Noise pollution has been attributed 71.4% to refinery development, and very few folks outside the shale development activity noticed much in the way of noise. This next slide we asked was around the issue of environmental impacts, which have received considerable amount of attention. We asked, please indicate the impact that shale development has had on issues such as stormwater runoff, erosion, light pollution, the demand for water, and water. By and large, these are relatively low response rates, with the exception of the noted demand for water. All of our respondents were collapsed down for the answers to these questions, and you'll see that across the group, 48.1%, or just under half, indicated a concern around the demand for water, and then 25.7% noted that the injection well disposal process, the waste disposal process, is an issue that they need that they're keeping track of. So let's look at the cluster that we're calling local employment and business activity. We asked the question, please indicate the impact that shale development has had on workforce migration. As with the response rate to the traffic volume, this is another area where we see a very high response rates, with our respondents attributing worker migration to pipeline construction at 81.3%, supply yards and staging areas at 90.8%, worker camps at 92.9%, and refinery activity at 100%. Even 29.2% of respondents reporting little or no shale activity in their area report an increase in workforce migration. We also asked whether local employment had increased or not, and we collapsed answers on this one as well. 57.5% of respondents reported an increase in local employment, or the employment of local residents, due to shale activity. So it's important for us to note this is not workers moving into the region, this is local employment. We asked a series of questions also that I'm collectively calling our local chamber of commerce questions. We asked whether restaurant activity had increased as a result of shale development. Respondents indicated that it had. We also asked whether retail activity had increased, and respondents indicated that it had. We also asked whether hotel occupancy rates had increased. And again, responses. This is interesting, just a brief anomaly maybe, but it's just interesting to point out that this is the only question we asked for injection wells were the leading response. Again, we can't relate whether this is a particular unique attribute for the injection well industry or it may be just an anomaly in our data, but it's just a small interesting finding. Our final cluster is around economic development and local economic development. We asked the question, please indicate the impact that shale development has had on local tax revenues. And across all local officials, only 35.6% indicated that local tax revenues had increased. But by and large, the county commissioners had seen a significant increase in local tax revenues. 87.5% of commissioners indicating that local tax revenues had increased, a lesser degree of city managers and mayors, and an even lesser degree of township trustees. We also asked about the development of businesses serving the shale industry. By and large, 51.1%, over half, had seen an increase in businesses either locating into the area, expanding, or new businesses occurring in the region, with no change reported at 41.8%, and nobody reported seeing a decrease in businesses serving the shale industry. We also asked about the availability and the demand for commercial and industrial space. 43.9% indicated an increase in the demand for commercial and industrial space, and 49.4% saw no change. And finally, we asked about hotel construction. 27.5% of respondents indicated an increase in hotel construction, with 65.2% indicating no change in hotel construction. And again, nobody indicated a decrease in hotel construction rates in the region. So in summary, we want to talk a little bit about some summary findings here. The shale development industry are being felt across the region, but they're particularly acute in areas where we see horizontal shale well drilling and also refineries and fractionation facilities. Respondents reported that it's generally the shale development is generally seen as a positive force, with combined 87.1% saying that it has either been a positive or a neutral influence, and only 7.8% saying that it has a negative influence. Infrastructure impacts are being felt throughout the region, but we're particularly seeing impacts in those areas where respondents feel that refineries are being developed or where shale horizontal drilling is taking place. But it's everywhere, really, even in those areas that are reporting no activity. Some of the largest impacts are being reported in those issues of traffic volumes and the need for public road maintenance. One interesting finding, very little reported impact around those issues of public safety that we discussed. That was a little bit surprising. Economic business impacts are largely positive, especially for those local chamber, the hotel occupancy, the restaurants, the other retail activity is very strong. Commissioners especially noted an increase in local tax revenues and a very high response around that. We also noted that there is in-migration of workers occurring, but we're also seeing that local residents are seeing jobs and getting jobs in this industry. We're also seeing increases in property and land values, as well as housing rental costs. We're also seeing the fact that in general, economic growth is positive. We're seeing an increase in businesses serving the shale industry, as well as an increase in growth in industrial and commercial space. And finally, the environmental impacts are not noted yet. They may be a trailing indicator, so something to keep an eye on. The one exception to that is that there is a noted increase in the demand for water. So as we look ahead, as I mentioned, we're very interested here at Ohio University and CE3 in trying to figure out where the industry is going, where the drilling is occurring, what the midstream and downstream opportunities are. Water demands are incredibly important. This industry has a huge water footprint. And so we're interested in understanding not just where the water comes from, but how it's used and reused and ultimately recycled and or disposed of. Population increases as workers move into or out of the area, and as folks flock to these jobs is something that's important. Understanding the sense of permanence of this, how long is this going to be occurring? Is this just a few years, or is this decades worth of work, is something that we're very interested in tracking. Also along those lines, the types of taxing structures and revenue generation for the state and for local governments is something that we're interested in keeping a track of. Are we looking at relatively short duration sales taxes or long duration local property taxes? We're also looking at fair value issues related to jobs and business and capital formation, wealth management, and again, all those things that lead to a sense of permanence and lasting value, and that will lead to a more resilient economy in the region. And then finally, what are the opportunities for keeping these revenues and keeping these value-added materials in the midstream and downstream, recycling in Ohio's economy, or are we looking at exporting this to other states and regions and nations as a raw commodity, and Ohio is achieving then the lowest value for our buck. Finally, I just want to note that this is an opinion survey. Once again, it's not meant to draw any causal relationships. We really don't know why respondents replied the way that they did. Again, we just expect that they replied in good faith and believe that they did. This is a baseline analysis, and it's a snapshot in time. We looked at the late summer of 2013. Things have changed even since then, and we're looking forward to conducting some other studies in the future and tracking how local officials' perceptions and attitudes change as the Utica and the Marcellus and Ohio formations mature and go forward. We were very pleased with the overall response rate to the survey and also the geographic distribution of the representatives that replied. And so as a function of that, we really want to thank all of those elected officials in the study area who took the time to complete the survey. We would not have been able to do this without them. We appreciate their responses. And with that, we wanted to say thank you, and we'll open the lines up for questions.